A kiss. Everybody knows what a kiss is? Has everybody been kissed in this room here? Well, the first time a kiss is ever documented, maybe the earliest documentation is in these chapters. The actual first time is when Jacob meets Isaac for the blessings, and he asks them, "Come and kiss me, father and son." That's the first kiss. Then later, there's the next chapter. There's Jacob kissing his Rachel when he meets her for the first time. And the one I'm going to talk about is the third kiss, which may be the most famous one of all, and the one in many ways, as we shall see, perhaps reshaped the entire history.
There are 4 personality types, archetypes, that define us all. Check out the description below, a course on the Kabbalah of the 4 elements.
And this is the episode in this week's chapter after 20 years, 34 years of not seeing each other. Jacob had escaped from Esau because Esau wanted to kill him. So this chapter begins with the dramatic conclusion of the story. What will happen now after all those years? Will Esau still carry that grudge? And so the chapter begins that Jacob sends 8 messengers out to see whether his brother Esau is ready to reconcile. And they come back with a bad report that Esau is marching with 400 men, meaning marching to war. So Jacob prepares, as the Torah tells us, in an intelligent way. What do you do when you're dealing with a confrontation? You cover all your bases. He prays, but he doesn't rely just on that. He also prepares a bribe to appease Esau. And finally he prepares for war, just in case. And it ends up being that the prayer and the appeasement worked. So then finally they meet. And here the story goes like this: that Esau, after he sees Jacob and his entire family, and then he sees his brother, it says Esau ran toward him, and he hugged him, he embraced him, he fell upon his neck and kissed him. He kissed him, and they both wept. So the interpretation of this verse is very simple. They were, after all, brothers. They weren't just brothers, they were twins. And despite their differences, which we know began actually in their mother's womb, because even in the pregnancy, Rebecca was struggling because Rebecca had a difficult pregnancy because these 2 children were struggling within her. Yet, at the end of the day, they were brothers, and here they finally saw each other after all these years. So, basically, Esau's heart melted, and he hugged, he embraced, and kissed his brother, and then they wept, which would be the obvious reaction of 2 people who haven't seen each other for a long time. They weep besides the love and the care. They also weep over all the years of what they missed and opportunities missed, and so on. But an interesting thing, and any of you have ever seen a Torah scroll? Torah scrolls are written without any grammatical punctuation. It's just Hebrew letters. That the one who's reading the Torah has to actually memorize how you pronounce these letters. So when you look in a Chumash in a printed book like this, they actually have all the grammatical configurations of how you pronounce each word. But in this case, this word V'shakehu, it's one of the only places in the Torah that it has dots on top of the word. And this goes back all the way from the time of Moses. When the Torah was written, it always had dots. There's a dotted kiss, you can call it. So the sages disagree upon the meaning of this dotted kiss. In other words, the kiss is not just a simple kiss. And there are 2 opinions brought in the Sifri, and Rashi cites it here brought in the Talmud, and Rashi cites it here on the verse. The 2 opinions are that when Esau kissed Jacob, was it with his complete heart or not? Did he do it with all of his heart, or not? And that's what the dots signify. One opinion says that he didn't do it with all his heart. The other one says that even though they were arch enemies, Nevertheless, here there was an exception that the kiss was actually a sincere one. So I want to talk about these two opinions, and obviously in a contemporary context, because as you know, I always discuss in this class here, to read the Torah, you can all, if you know Hebrew or you read English translations, you can all do this on your own. But the greatest challenge we have is finding relevance, personal and psychological and emotional relevance in these episodes. And you'd be surprised how contemporary and how applicable this story here, this message, the story with the kiss and the two meanings in the kiss is to our own lives. So let me put it in more, as I said, contemporary language. I mean, a very basic level, you have here two brothers who are brothers, blood brothers, but at the same time also enemies. As I mentioned, they represented two different ideals. Early on, the Torah tells us that when they were the young children, and as they started growing, they were diametric opposites. Esau was a warrior, a cunning warrior, a hunter. And Jacob was, Ishtam was a wholesome person, a scholar. Person who sat in the tents is the expression, which means he was a scholar. He was an academic. And therefore they represented two different archetypes. One whose role is basically the hunter. You know, there are people who are great hunters, they're great conquerors, who know how to tame the elements. They're cunning, they're shrewd, they know how to focus and how to win in this cruel and corrupt world. And then there are the scholars, who sometimes are seen more naive and more out of touch. But on the other hand, in a sense, they live in a more insulated environment. And these two brothers represented these two types of entities. But the mystics take it a lot further, and they say that the real battle between Jacob and Esau was not just their personalities, they actually represent the battle in each one of our lives. The battle between, we'll call it the battle between matter and spirit. That there are two forces in each of our lives, that, meaning inside each of us, one that is driven by the need to survive. Survival of the fittest, as they say. The need to make ends meet. And for that we need to maneuver, we need to pay our bills, we need to work, we need to compete and negotiate and try to win out in this race, the rat race called life. But then there's another dimension in each of us, the Jacob in each of us, which is the soul. And that is, let's call it the transcendental side within all of us. Every person, even the most materialistic, has transcendental needs. Transcendental needs mean anything that is not tangible, anything that in a way lifts you up from the monotony and the routine of life. So every one of us is in need of that. For some, they do that because it's very difficult for a human being to just survive an animal bliss naturally, because we have a certain natural angst within our spirit, a certain restlessness, and the routine of life, the day-to-day grind, wears us down. So we look for different types of escape to relieve the tension, the existential loneliness, or the existential battles that we fight. And so each of us does it in different ways. Some do it through romance and love, sexuality. Others through literature, art, music, travel. Others through religion and spirituality, or a combination of the above. You know, we take off weekends, vacations, holidays, where we do something that, in a way, takes us away from the day-to-day routine, the day-to-day grind, as I said. And that's a necessity in a human being's life. Now, some of us pursue transcendental needs. We feed our transcendental needs through healthy ways, and some not healthy. You know, when you see people who, for example, get addicted to whatever it is, and even things that are destructive, self-destructive, nobody sets out. There's no normal, healthy human being in the world that wants to destroy themselves. Nobody wants to just be addicted and become a slave to some substance, or to some object, or to some behavior. It's not, the natural human pride would dictate that a person would resist trying to be a slave. We want to be a master, not a slave. And addiction is being a slave. So how did that happen? How does the human being get trapped to become to basically to be so self-destructive that they actually become a slave to something outside of them? Is because there's a deep hunger. The hunger is very healthy. When a person has deep hunger or deep thirst, from one way or another, they're going to satisfy it. And if they can get it in a healthy way, great. If not, they're not. It's like you're in a desert, wandering in a desert, and you haven't drank water for who knows how long, and then suddenly you're desperate, you suddenly see a spring of water, or you see a bottle of something. You may not even think. You can swallow poison. But you're so desperate, in your desperation, you'll take whatever it is that will quench your extreme thirst. And the same is true psychologically and psychically, that we have deep needs, and whenever you see addiction, or whenever you see any extreme reaction, even very destructive, always know that there's always at the heart of it something very healthy, and very holy actually. That is the hunger, the need. How we fill our needs can be obviously healthy or not healthy. But the need itself is considered to be an extremely powerful thing. Mediocre people don't get that addicted to things. It's very powerful people who have a lot of passion, a lot of energy to release, to vent, and so on. They don't have a place to release it, tend to go in that direction. So there's the transcendental need. So essentially, Esav and Jacob are really two necessary forces each of us have. On one hand, we need to have a certain element of cunning to be able to. We live in a world where we need to calculate and maneuver, and we live in a world that there's danger lurks, and not everybody's thinking about our best interest. So you have to be able to also know how to protect yourself, defend yourself, and fight battles if necessary. And then there's the Jacob within each of us, which is the transcendental dimension, the scholar, the thinker, the reflector, the idealist. Now, per se, Esav alone, the problem with Esav is when you only become that. If that becomes your whole life, that all you are is a conqueror and a hunter and an aggressor, and you do not feed the other side, that's when there are problems. So we really have a conflict between these two forces and voices within us, and it takes on the shape that you know in your own life. I'll just give you examples. The battle between narcissism, self-interest, selfishness, and selflessness. We make choices like this hundreds of times a day. You meet someone, you meet a situation. How are you going to behave? Will it be about me, or do you have some consideration for another? So at our worst, we're Esav at our worst. We're complete hunters, and everything is just opportunities, and we're opportunists, and we're ready to even hurt people. If we're smart, we know how to maneuver. They can't tell. We masquerade, but we're cunning hunters essentially, and conquerors. But there's the other side of us, which calls upon, whether it's your conscience or your soul or your spirit, that recognizes the need to the sensitivity, the thing that allows us to love each other, and not just love on our terms, but actually be able to yield and be flexible and be able to compromise because you care about someone else. It's a completely different voice. And these two always battle with each other. Some call it the battle between the mind and the heart. Your heart tells you one thing, your mind tells you another. Anytime on a very basic level, I've mentioned this many times, anytime a telemarketer tries to sell you something, they're basically manipulating your emotions. And it's hard to say no. How many times people don't know how to say no on the telephone? Today we have caller ID, so we're avoiding a lot of these calls, but a lot of people don't know how to say no. They say, call back tomorrow. You know that you're not interested in it. But for some reason we have this type of resistance. Until we get upset enough, then we say only no to everybody, whoever we meet. So there's a certain thing, and someone tries to sell you something, they are basically telling you that if you don't do it now, you'll lose the opportunity. It's a manipulation of emotions. The mind, on the other hand, dictates, reflect, sleep over it, come back next week. But of course, someone who's a good salesperson is going to say next week you won't have the opportunity, because they know they have to get you in the hot. They can't let you think about it too long. And then you succumb, and then who knows, the next thing you know, you end up with what we call a shmata. You know what a shmata is? A piece of junk that was sold to you. So hopefully you only make that mistake once. As they say, when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. Now, if this happens too many times to you, maybe you should try a different career. There are people that, no matter what you do, no matter how you plan it, at the end of the thing, they're always up one on you. And people just have that instinct. So to have this element is fine when there's balance. The problem is when life becomes a dog fight, and dog eats dog, and a rat race, and you constantly don't know who's going to stab you in the back to climb the corporate ladder, and you find best friends who are then forced to compete against each other, and they'll do things sometimes that you wouldn't, unimaginable. You realize that the world is a very difficult world, and it's an Esav-style world of aggression. Sometimes it's packaged in cordiality, sometimes it's not. Especially in today's economic climate, many people are suffering from this. You suddenly realize you dedicate your life 30 years to a company. There's no heart. When it comes down to it, the bottom line dictates that you're out. There's no compassion, and so on. There are a few instances, bosses, companies who show compassion, but the larger it is, the more corporate, the more cold it is. So we live in a cold, difficult world, and many of us have adjusted to this world, sadly, and in a way have given up on our deeper ideals and aspirations. But there's another world, the world of Jacob, which is a pure world. And these two clash. This is a perpetual clash, a perpetual battle that plays itself out in our lives hundreds of different ways. Just to give a few more examples. Who doesn't have, for example, the battle between your personal life and your work life? You just have that many hours in the day. Whether it's your personal life, relationships, or family. And then on the other hand, you have to make ends meet and you have to work these long hours. There's no way that you can do two things at once. Or as I meant, or in different contexts, the battle between your own personal ideals and then what you have to compromise in the marketplace. So many people create almost a compartmentalized life. They're almost like Jacob and Esau, like Jekyll and Hyde, and they just use different tools at different times, and they have a compartmentalized life. Obviously, Judaism teaches, and its goal is integration. How do you ultimately create peace between these two worlds? So the story of Jacob and Esau, therefore, takes on a whole different dimension when you think of it in this context. It's not just another episode about two brothers. It's really the story of our own lives, of our conflicts, of our clashes. Can we reconcile? Can one trust the other? And even the kiss, and when they hug and embrace, is also left in a type of enigmatic situation. Do they really embrace? Is it complete? There's even a commentary that says, one opinion that says that when he says, what does it mean he fell on his neck? That he actually bit him. Something like, who was it? Mike Tyson when he bit off Holyfield's ear. That one? Something like that. He actually bit him. So, you see here, there's in other words, love-hate relationship, as they call it. A kiss, a bite, a hug, an embrace, and so on. And you see at the end of the story, it's not that simple. Jacob doesn't say to Esau, when Esau says, come, let's live side by side, Jacob says, you go ahead, I'll come afterwards. You go ahead, the children are young, the sheep are tender, we're not yet ready. And he wasn't lying, as Rashi explains, he meant the end of days, Messianic age, one day we will make peace. But he recognized, Jacob, that as much as that moment of inspiration, even if Esau actually was sincere in this embrace, he realized it's not going to last. So in other words, when we finally make peace between matter and spirit, between our souls and our bodies, between our self-interest and our more noble side, our serving ourselves or serving a higher cause, even after they make some peace, it doesn't mean that it's all peace. The battle continues. Sometimes one wins, sometimes the other. And this is a continuous battle, which at the end of the day will be reconciled. So the application to the issue of this kiss, to bring it a little more specifically, I mentioned the battle between matter and spirit. I should have added that point. I gave some examples of manifestation of this Jacob-Esau perpetual struggle. Another example is somewhat like on a scientific level, even technology. It's perhaps a little more abstract than on a personal level, but it's also scientific. In essence, what is really science? What is technology? It's the search for the unified force that connects matter and spirit, or matter and energy. Once upon a time, we lived in a world where we recognized that there were thousands or maybe millions of different forces. Today, scientists realize that there are only very few forces, and they're all really connected to one another. Science, there's the four main forces. There's gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the nuclear force, and the weak force. And the great search, the holy grail of physics, is the search for the unified field theory. One rule, one law that would explain everything. That's not yet been discovered. Einstein, till his last day, was searching for. And physics still search for it. Without going to a whole scientific treatise here, briefly, in simple English, it means the following. Before we were able to understand the forces that shape the world, the world was a very fragmented world. Today we know that there are forces that unite everything. And this is called energy. For example, this is a table. This is a chair. Everything in this universe is made up of molecules, or elements, which are made up of molecules, which are made up of atoms, and which in turn are made up of subatomic particles. And those subatomic particles, and those atoms and molecules, they're much less diversity than the objects that we see in the universe. So science essentially began to unify and understand the universe as one whole. And once we began to realize and understand that energy is the force that shapes everything, and today this is common knowledge, whether it's in the human body, DNA, the subcellular structure of our genes, these are all invisible forces. Or whether it's subatomic particles that is able to be turned into, through fusion and fission, into a tremendous amount of called nuclear energy. So today we have overcome this so-called clash or battle between matter and spirit. Today we know the material it contains in it enormous amount of energy, and we've discovered ways to tap into that energy. That's why we have technologies like today, whether it's a cell phone or a computer or a fax machine or anything. It's really bridged. What is it? What has it bridged? The space, the division between space and time that has always divided us. So interestingly, matter, part of matter is defined by time and space. That's the definition of a material world. The distinction between time and space. It took time to travel from one place to the next because space is a physical entity. Technology, especially communications, is able to bridge that time and space. And you could be right here and be broadcasting to anywhere in the world and hearing and listening and speaking to someone a million miles away in almost a split second. What is it in simple terms? It means that we've overcome, transcended the resistance and the divisions of matter that separate us. Now, the final frontier, of course, is when it's applied also in personal terms, that we actually learn to love each other unconditionally. But at least on a communications level, this conquest is actually the conquest of connecting matter and spirit, or matter and energy. In the words of Einstein, E equals mc squared. So Jacob and Esav is matter and energy. That's what it really is. And today we know they're reversible. There's no such thing as, for example, you can destroy matter. You can take a physical object, a piece of wood, you can burn it into ashes, spread the ashes all over, mix it with water, wherever it disappears, it never disappears. It turned into energy. And that energy is now somewhere part of the world. And we can also do the reverse. We can take energy and bottle it and turn it into matter. And you can really never destroy anything, really. It's a whole different way of looking at the universe. And essentially, it really is also the bridge of body and soul, of matter and spirit, or matter and energy. I just wanted to point out how universal this theme is. But to bring it back to the personal level, one of the places where the biggest clashes manifest is, of course, we call the biggest battles of life are around the areas of love and relationships. People can deeply love each other, and then you can see how they can wage war. People love each other a year ago, and now they're in court in the ugliest type of divorce, ready to kill each other in the worst possible way. Love has the double-edged sword because it evokes such powerful emotions. When love is lost, or when love is broken, or you feel betrayed, it also evokes the opposite. You want to kill the person that hurt you. Now some people actually do that. But even if you don't really resort to killing, and that's not really what I came to advocate at this class, so please don't, it's not exactly what I'm trying to encourage. But nevertheless, it releases very, very intense emotions. Anger, disappointment. Everyone knows what a broken heart is like. I hope you would never know, but I would assume at this point everybody here would know that experience. So, if you never let anyone into your heart, obviously you're not going to be hurt, but you're also not going to be loved, and you won't love. So of course everyone would like to be able to find that would probably be the best selling pill, if someone can find a medication where you can just take it, only love and not ever be hurt. But that, of course, is impossible. Because it's like you open a door, just like something goes out, something can get in. And part of love is being vulnerable. That's the beauty of it. And also the risks. Like anything, you want high yield, there's high risk. And the same thing with love. Love means opening your heart to someone, meaning that yes, you could be hurt. And having the strength to be able to take that risk and finding the right person that you can trust and love forever, and that person loves you. But it's easier said than done. It's one of the most elusive searches, and especially in our day and age. Whatever the reason is, maybe because we live in a fast food society, maybe because we live in a world where we think we can acquire everything and buy anything. So, buying love seems to be something people, even though it doesn't make any sense, but people continue to try to do it. Whatever the reason is definitely we live in a time of crisis. And in New York, maybe more than anywhere else in the world, because of the concentration, the party sense of things, energy going on in the city, and also, of course, when there's energy, there's major single life, and it becomes a mecca or epidemic of singles, and so on. So there's a lot of spirit. So when it comes to that issue of love, the battles that are fought, and battles, I just spoke about battles in a more overt sense. In a more subtle sense, it's obvious what the battles are. Our own battle. How do we determine who's the right person for us? How do we determine who is the person that we will want to kiss the rest of our lives and who we don't want to? Exactly like it says here. And how do you know? Sometimes you're attracted to someone, and initially everything seems right, and this is a person you feel is made for you, and then time passes and you realize it's not the right thing. Not always what meets the naked eye. Sometimes things are not as obvious. And then there's the other extreme. We sometimes meet somebody and we think that person is completely not appropriate, and you end up seeing time passes, and that two people, and they join together, and there's a perfect match. I could tell you tens of instances in my own experiences where people who actually broke up 20 times, 30 times, and thought they'd never ever come together, and today they're the happiest people. And of course, most people fall into neither of those two categories. They neither find the right person, and they're still looking, and so on. So everybody, the good news is, I guess this topic is a very good one to talk about because everybody's interested in it, because it's like certain topics that are relevant to some of us and not relevant to others. When it comes to relationships, everybody's either in one or out of one, or on the way out or on the way in, or in a bad one or in a good one. There's really no other option. Everybody. There's no person immune to that. And even those that have made the decision they don't want any more relationships, they've been hurt, it's also a position. It's also connected to it. So these matters of the heart are the most complicated to talk about. Obviously, I've always mentioned that when I remember once traveling somewhere, and the program director called me to speak, a speaking engagement. So the program director called me. She called me to ask me to discuss what should be the topics for the weekend. So I always tell people, listen, it always depends on the target audience. You have to know who's coming, and the people there, and find out what they're interested in, and just to impose. She said, listen, you have experience. From your experience, what do you think would be the good topics? So look, I said, if you're going to arrive completely on my experience without knowing the people, the two safe things that are always the top two on the list is anything around relationships, love, marriage, sexuality is number one. And number two, the top 10 is pain and suffering. So she says to me on the phone, I remember she said, those aren't two topics, it's the same thing, which was interesting. I would see them as two different titles and talk about them at different times, but the fact is they are usually very much interconnected. So this issue, and as I shall try to explain, this issue of Jacob and Esau's reconciliation, or was it a reconciliation, it very much captures the story of our own love in a sense. So even though these is not a romantic love, this kiss, and not these are two brothers, more of a sibling type of love or rivalry, but nevertheless, this, on a broader sense, this issue is a very powerful one, because we live in a world, as I said, you can feel like you love somebody, you want to kiss them, and then you find out they're not exactly made for you. You may even find out they're your enemy. You find people who are able to even love, and when you get to know them better, you see they're really not really loving you. They just know how to play the game, as they say. They know how to go through the maneuvers. There are people who do that. Especially someone, let's say, who's grown up in a broken home, or had a fractured childhood, dysfunctional experiences, especially severe abuse. Just using a strong example just to make the point. I hope nobody's ever had such an experience, but anyone who's grown up where their emotional and sexual boundaries were violated as a child, whether it's sexual abuse or just things that are strong on that level, there's a major distortion that begins to happen in a child's life when there is especially continued abuse, not just a one-time anomaly. And that is, they begin a distortion of what love means. And often in these cases, without therapy, without work, a child like that may grow up, and their way of understanding love is a very distorted way. They may love people on one level, but they'll never really open up a part of themselves. How often have you dated someone or met someone who you see that even though on one hand they can be very kind and loving, but you always see there's some type of dark secret or dark, closed, locked closet that you can't enter. And as much as you try, and even if the other person wants to, really loves you and says, I'd love to go there, there's a certain place that's locked. Those type of locked places are usually a result of someone who suffered some experience of trauma. And they locked away, not intentionally. What a child does when a child is hurt, a child will lock away certain emotions because they don't want to be hurt. It's a natural reaction. I mean, this has been proven even in laboratories with animals and so on. If you repeatedly hurt an animal in a certain place, that animal will begin to maneuver itself and change its shape, not to be touched and hurt in that place. That's even on a physical level, because after a while you adjust. So emotionally, the same is true. When a person has been in some way violated or hurt, what they do is they close off that place inside of themselves because they don't want to be hurt. And a child will do it very effectively. And in a way, it's almost like a divine gift because the child does not want to be hurt. Even to use an extreme, I don't know if you've ever heard the idea of the out-of-body experience that some people have. As a result, often people who had suffered some serious sexual trauma especially, will have out-of-body experiences as they grow up, because what happens is the pain, the shock to the system of someone who's hurt that way creates almost like a out-of-body experience where the child separates from itself psychologically and almost like says, the abuse is happening not to me, to someone else, because it's too horrific to think that you're being hurt by someone you love. And you really create almost a detached state. And there are people who have mastered that type of detachment. I'm only using this, as I said, as extreme examples to show what happens. And on a subtle level, this happens to all of us. Where we who've been hurt will put away a certain part of us and we will not expose it. And it's not even intentional. It's not like you suddenly meet someone that you really can trust and suddenly you open up. You've trained yourself so much you can't even open it to yourself, which is part of the part of the problem. So what you see here is, in other words, sometimes what you see is not what you get. And you can have people who, on one hand, can be very, very passionate in love, and in truth is they don't really have all of them, even though they're very passionate. And there are people who have actually mastered. We could even say that some people who seem to be so perfect in the area of love and relationships are that perfect because they've learned to develop a set of tools because they want people to love them. So they learn how to do that well. And I wouldn't call it a masquerade, but it's not getting the complete person. And a big part of real healthy therapy is learning to integrate, connect the two parts in yourself. So here you have a more subtle psychological application of a Jacob and Esau type of split, where we live in a world where, as I said, if you've been hurt in this world, and the world can hurt us, people can hurt us, especially the most closest to us, the worst type of abuse is when it comes from someone that is close to us. A stranger is a stranger. A child naturally will avoid a stranger. But when it comes from someone that's close, a parent, or a relative, or someone you trust, that's where it gets very complicated. Because the child naturally is expecting love from that place. And when instead of love receives something opposite of love, it completely screws up the child's wiring. Now, what's going on here? It's supposed to love me. My father and mother are supposed to love me, but they're behaving in a way that doesn't. It's not loving. So you start saying to yourself, so what? So they begin to create two worlds, a love-hate thing. It's even been, this is commonly documented, people who've been hurt in that way, they expect that when they will experience love, there will always come a point where they will be hurt. To the point that they expect that the person who loves them is going to punish them at some point. Now, to most people who grown up in a healthy environment, that sounds insane. Why would you think that a person is going to love you, the next thing they'll do is slap you? It's because you've been trained as a child. That's what happens. People who love you hurt you. And there you go. What happens then is that you don't know what is good and what is bad. So when when this verse is struggling, the dotted kiss, did he kiss with a full heart or not? It could be both are true. There was a part of him that really wanted to embrace Jacob, but there was a part of him that was the hunter and knew that at the end of the day we live in a tough world and he wasn't ready to just let go. So psychologically, we all have that Esav inside of us. So even when we're in our purest moments, and that's when things become so complicated, is that when you're someone you really love and you've found a relationship and it's a healthy one, and in their purest moments, there still can be a flashback or a memory of the Esav inside of a person, and the kiss is not necessarily a complete one. So then the question is, how do we determine who we can find that we can totally trust and embrace and kiss with a full heart, and they will kiss us with a full heart? And when can we not trust it? As I said, there are situations where you sometimes meet somebody and you think this is the person, this is the one. And it turns out to be not the way it is. Not that. It turned out to be wrong. And then it's the opposite extreme. So that's very much part of this discussion here of what is the complete embrace, not complete embrace. So let's go back to the Jacob Esav story and then we'll apply it back to ourselves. So here you have as I said, two brothers. So on one hand, there's definitely love between them. On the other hand, as I pointed out, the entire story of their lives was always struggle and conflict. So clearly they had both elements. Brothers, at the same time, had many things that they disagreed about. Jacob had stolen the blessings, had stolen the first birthright, so there are plenty of reasons Esau could be angry at him. Bottom line is, it's a complicated relationship. Well, nothing new, right? Anyone here have siblings? So, it's complicated relationships. I have 4 siblings. I'm the oldest of 5. When you're the oldest, maybe more complications for those younger than you, but it's always complicated. Okay, well, so here we have a specimen A that has no complications with his siblings. Huh? Okay, the oldest of 15. Or you're not aware of the complications. There's another option. I'm not trying to say there's a problem with everything, because no human beings are perfect. We all have our cracks. It's just a question of if there's too much pressure, then the cracks start to, the seams start to open up. But regardless, Esau and Jacob for sure, David is not like your family. So they definitely had issues. The truth is, actually, the siblings in the Torah are notorious for having their issues. Look, Cain kills Abel. The children of Noah castrate their father. The daughters of Lot have their time with their father. They have a whole experience there. You have Yishmael and Isaac are at war. Jacob and Esau are at war. Jacob's children end up selling one of their brothers into slavery, almost killing him. I mean, it's not exactly what we call like a peaceful situation. So, in each case, obviously, they all have many lessons to us. And I'm focusing on this one here. So here you have this mixed feelings, which of course is the gray area of life that is more complicated. It would be nice if everything was black and white, and we just, love is love, hate is hate, and that's it. The people who love you, the people who hate you. But it's not that way. It's the snowball effect, where we have mix. You have, like they say, ein tov b'lei ra, ve'ein ra b'lei tov. Everything good has some bad in it, and everything bad has something good in it. There's always two sides to every coin. You hope that the primary force would be good, and minority is diminished or so-called cancelled out by the goodness. So there's no surprise here, therefore, that Jacob and Esav is the same story. And in the context of these two opinions, whether he kissed him or embraced him, kissed him with the word the shekeh was the dotted kiss, whether he kissed him with his complete heart or not, it really comes down to which part really dominated at that moment. Because even according to the opinion that he did it with his complete heart, it doesn't say that's the way it remained. It just says this was a moment where his heart melted and he connected. So this takes us back to really the essence of what we are as human beings. Who are we at heart? Are we the hunter or are we the transcendent one? Are we essentially a soul or essentially a body? That's the question. Now, it's not such an easy one to answer because when you go even in the Bible, even when God is creating Adam and Eve, it says he took he took earth from the ground, right? And imbued into this earth, into this ball of clay, a breath of life, a divine soul. So clearly a human being is made up of body and soul, something that's very earthy and something that's very spiritual. And it's all joined in one. So the question is, who is the real you? In using Freudian language, which I've done in the past here, the question is, are you the id or are you the yid? Okay? Freud is not the yid, the discussion is the id. But in essence, Freudian thought is that a human being is essentially a selfish beast. And left to our own accord, it's all about me, me, me. And especially in the areas of sexuality. But Freud explains that there's also a thing called an ego and a superego that superimposes itself and tells the id or tells the person that you have to compromise, that you have to tame yourself, you have to coexist with others. And there's a clash between the id and the ego and superego all the time. What does Judaism have to say about this? And obviously it has a lot to say. Because if ultimately, when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, we are an id, then you could really question the whole concept of human responsibility. We're really not responsible. When a lion or a predator in the wild gets hungry and it goes hunting and it kills a defenseless animal, we don't prosecute it, and we don't even say it's sinful. It didn't sin or transgress. It's doing what its nature is. Its nature is to hunt. That's how it works. And part of it also keeps the balance of nature in certain equilibrium. So you could argue when a human being resorts to selfishness, we're really just going back to our essential selves. So when you have horrific stories about people getting stuck in an avalanche, true stories, and they have no food left, and how they turn on each other, and they wait for someone who's the weakest, and they help them die, and then, I don't even want to tell you what they do, but they resort to cannibalism. You start wondering, what would we do in such a situation? So most of us initially say, that's impossible, I would never do that. Yeah, but you never know what hunger does to people. And maybe when a person is under conditions that are extreme conditions, or we see you do things that you never imagined yourself, unimaginable. You see during the Holocaust, and other times, you see people, when it came to saving their own skin, what they would do to other people. Torture and other threats to our own being can cause people to become worse than animals, to their own, even families and friends. And then you see people, even in the worst and harshest of times, rose to unbelievable acts of nobility. So you wonder, what's the difference between this one and that one? Are they born different? Are they genetic? Are they different education? So this is a big issue, obviously, from a Torah and Jewish perspective, because it comes down to what are we accountable? What are we responsible for? If we ultimately are just evolved beasts, then what can you really expect of human beings? So yes, we have a system of law and order officially, so that if you pass a red light, or if you hurt someone else, they can sue you, and you go to court. Well, Some argue courts aren't for justice anyway, but that's another story. But let's, for argument's sake, we do have a law and order system. That's really not because we expect that people should be angels, but because there's a thing called a deterrent. As I said, even in Freudian thought, even in radical Freudian thinking, there are forces inside of us that tell us it's important for our selfish survival to coexist with others. If we all don't have red lights and green lights, we'll end up killing each other. So it's for practical purpose, not necessarily for spiritual purposes. But the Torah rejects all this. The Torah says that, yes, we have a side that you're made out of earth, a side that's all about survival and selfish needs. But there's another side to you that's called the Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim, that you're imbued with a spirit of God. And that's your transcendental side. And that's the real you, not the other part. The fact that we don't always know it is because that's part of the battle. The soul was placed intentionally into a dark and selfish body in order for the soul to teach the body, train it to become sublimated and become a tool, a channel for spiritual expression. That's in essence the Jewish perspective on all of life. So all the darkness we go through in this world, all the challenges, from the first traumatic moment of birth, and through all the different cycles and ups and downs, is because we are charged, meaning your soul is charged to enter into a very material, physical, selfish body, into a very selfish and self-oriented material world, and to reverse the process, to turn this material world into fuel for spiritual expression. So initially, everything begins selfish. Everything begins with me. But as we grow and mature, and our minds mature, and our hearts mature, and our souls take hold, that's the ultimate goal, that your soul become the dominant force in your life. The fact that most of us don't reach that place is simply, number one, is we've not necessarily been trained to think like this. Many times people hear this from me speaking about this, they think it's the first time they heard it. People have told me this. So some of us don't even know that this is expected of us. And if you don't even know it's expected of you, obviously you're not going to live up to something you've never been trained to think about. But this is the ABC of Judaism. More than all the mitzvahs in the world. It's not about Shabbos and kosher. See, we're trained, even those that have gone to good Hebrew schools, know there's a thing called Shabbat, there's kosher, there's Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. But those are all tools. What's the purpose of them all? That very few people know. The purpose of all those mitzvahs and all the holidays and all the traditions and all the rituals is only one thing. It's to help sublimate the material world and turn it into a channel for spirituality, for something higher than you. That's why it's so disturbing, of course, when people use religion for selfish purposes, because it's like the most ironic twist of the whole purpose of all these mitzvahs was to elevate and turn us into selfless people. So when a person becomes religiously selfish and their religion is just another manifestation of their earthiness instead of their soulfulness, that, of course, is the worst distortion of all. But that's the world we live in. Most people are unaware of what I just said, these few lines. But when you hear about it, you hear it for the first time, or the second time, or the 20th time, it resonates. It resonates because, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now I understand why great people like Abraham and Moses, and all these greats throughout the generations, what did they die for? What did they sacrifice for? It wasn't just to keep a few rituals. They weren't just mechanical human beings. They understood that they were living up to fulfilling the mission of existence. The mission of their lives was to, in some way, infuse and reveal in the material world its deeper purpose. So when you think of it that way, then yes, we do have two components to our personality, but it's not because to confuse us to who the real you is. It's very clear. The real you is the soul, just like the real reality of all reality is a divine force. It's a higher reality than we can perceive in this universe. And that higher reality in some way concealed its presence, which the Kabbalists, Arizal primarily, the Isaac Luria, the great 16th century mystic, explained the concept of the tzimtzum, a concealment of true reality, to the point that we could perceive ourselves as being an independent existence. Each of us goes about our way. We have no clue even that we're connected. See, from that perspective, the big question and dilemma that great mystics always have is this one. How is it that human beings can hurt each other? If we're all part of one field of energy, one organism, is it conceivable, for example, the right hand would hurt the left hand? That one part of your body would attack another part of the body? That's considered a disease. So how is it possible, if there's one integral unity that connects us all, that we can hurt each other? The answer is we're blind. We don't see it. We don't see it. Even an animal will not jump into fire, because it knows it's dangerous. But if it doesn't know it's fire, it will jump. We do many, many things that are destructive to ourselves because we have no clue. We don't know. We don't know that this is going against who we really are. And when you discover it, that's when, of course, the beginning of any healing and any type of growth. So it's not about a dilemma, who are we? It's very clear. We begin as spirits. And then we're sent into a difficult world with a purpose and the power to radiate and to illuminate and to bring light into a dark world and warmth into a cold universe. And we are given the powers to do so. Above all, the power, of course, is your mind and your focus and your willpower to commit to doing something like this. So the story of Jacob and Esau is really this story. Two forces that are clash with each other, but there's a purpose. The purpose is not that they clash, the purpose is that they make peace. But peace doesn't come easily. There will be a constant back and forth, back and forth. So even Esau, even the enemy has within them a certain sense that this is his brother, and therefore some opinions hold that he kissed him with his full heart, because he had a sense for a moment. But that doesn't mean that it's sustainable. It still needed plenty of time to discipline. We have this all the time. Sometimes people who are at war with each other, people, let's say brothers or family members or people who love each other, and there may be a moment of when they get soft and they open up, but then they go back, whatever reason, they go back to their own obstinate state of mind. And then there's the opinion that he didn't kiss him with a complete heart because the battle continues. So in our own relationships, we too have these two things. The fact of the matter is, every human being on earth deserves and has someone that they can love and will be loved. Jewish thinking teaches us that every person, long before you were born, just like you were given all the tools you would need and resources to function in this dark world and to not only to survive, but to thrive and prevail, you're also given the soulmate that is waiting for you. Because human beings are created the same what I mentioned before. God took a clump of earth and imbued it with a soul. He also created man and woman as one. And therefore they will always search out for each other. So every person on this earth has a soulmate there somewhere. It's a given. From a Jewish perspective, just as we know that a person is fundamentally a good person, and not the id, but the spark, the divine spark, the same is true that every person deserves love, has someone they can love, and someone that will love them. So why is it so difficult to find? It's so difficult to find for the same reason it's difficult to find truth in this world. The same reason it's difficult to find that good prevails. The classic question, why the wicked prosper and the good suffer. Because it's precisely the way God planned the universe. He did not want to make it easy. Part of the purpose of existence is for us to discover the way in a dark world. So one of that type of discovery is to discover that soulmate. But the only way you can really find your soulmate is to first find your own soul. Right? It would be a little strange to be able to find someone, your soulmate, if you don't know you have a soul or understand it. The fact that some people meet even before they're spiritually evolved, that happens because there's a certain instincts, and if you're blessed, it may come easier than for others. But the fact of the matter, there's plenty we can do to make the journey easier. And the first step is to discover who you are. And if you're unable to kiss and hug yourself, you're definitely not going to be able to find someone else to kiss and hug. But we live in this illusion that, and some people actually will articulate it as such, that, you know what, I don't love myself, but maybe I'll find someone who'll save me. And everyone likes to admit that I'm looking for someone to be the savior, like the knight in shining armor. And this goes both for men and women. But the fact is, often when we grew up in the homes that we're not loving, or we ourselves have our own insecurity issues and fears, we often think the panacea approach. I'll find the right person and they'll solve all my problems. Because they'll love me unconditionally. And I'll make sure they do. Yeah, that may work for short term. It doesn't work for long term. It's impossible to work, because at some point your own insecurities are going to come back to haunt the relationship. And you're going to want more and more and more from the other, and it will not be practical. It won't work. Now, I've seen these type of imbalances. I've seen in relationships where one person does most of the giving, the other one does most of the taking. And it works out for each of them. It's like convenient. They found themselves a good symbiotic, it's like the parasite and the feeder, and what's the word? On the back of a shark, you have these parasites that the sharks leave them be there because they eat off the bugs and the bacteria. So there are relationships that work that way. I don't want to be demeaning in any sense, but they usually somewhere will give, especially when there's a crisis. Because at some point, a person who's giving more than they should be will become resentful, and their needs will ultimately be compromised. And vice versa, a person who knows that they're not really giving and there's someone else's like so-called their savior, it has to ultimately eat away at the person's pride. So I'm not going to go through analysis of every particular type of personality. There's so many different. Every one of us is in a story of our own. But the fact of the matter is, and I go back to the Torah's concept of believing in us. It comes down to that each of us has an intact, pure soul, and therefore we have in ourselves the ability to find another soul that will join with you. So the challenge is, number one, is to become soulful like that and have that type of consciousness. Number two, to not be naive and realize that we do live in a world where not everybody is in that place. So what is required more above all? It's required to understand that we don't have it all figured out. I know that's you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that. But the fact is, in relationships, we do. Because, as I mentioned before, often you meet somebody and you think this is the person. Love at first sight. I don't know about that. Some of you believe in love at first sight. When you get a little older, most people don't believe in love at first sight. It's good in the movies and the books. It sounds nice. So people get attracted to someone. And we know the power of attraction, the power of being seduced, the power of being beguiled, being beguiled, the power of something that overwhelms you. And it could be physical looks, it could be emotional attraction, it could be your own needs. But one thing is for sure, when you're in that emotional place, it's like a whirlpool, which means you're not total control. It's not like you're balanced, objective, and have it all figured out. And I'm not saying necessarily that's a bad thing. But subjectivity blinds us. And when it blinds us, you may then at that point be blinded to everything and say, this must be the person for me. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've counseled, and they tell me, this is the person for me no matter what. So why are you coming to see me? Because it's not working between us. So maybe it's not the perfect person for you? No, impossible. So how are you so sure? And especially when you're emotional, and we're all emotional in relationships. We all are. That's why we need friends who can help us, who are not so subjective about the situation, to give us a perspective. Now, how do we get into those traps? It's not difficult to imagine scenarios. For example, one scenario is when you're desperate. You're really in need of love. And when you're really in need of love, you meet somebody, and if they're able to give some extent, you become addicted to them. And I'm not even saying that's the wrong person. But it may be, you might have met the right person for the wrong reasons, so to speak. Sometimes the other way around. You meet the wrong person for the right reasons. In other words, it's critical to really analyze this. And this verse, the fact that this kiss is dotted, tells us that attraction which a kiss is really representative of two people connecting, basically. That this connection, that this attraction, why you'd want to kiss someone. It's not the literal, here there's a literal kiss, but it doesn't just mean kiss. It means, why would you want to be with someone? Why would you want to connect with them? Why do you want to become one with them? Has to be always looked at with a lot of discretion. That's really, in essence, what the verse is saying. So it takes a word called the kiss, and they kissed, and he kissed, and kissed him, and that's it, to tell us that when you're attracted to someone, you want to kiss them, always know that it's complicated. When I say complicated, not to complicate relationships, it's just a reflection that not always attraction is necessarily healthy. Or let me rephrase that. Not to say healthy. Not all attraction means that person is the right one for you, or not always. Lack of attraction means that the person is wrong for you. There are more factors involved. Acknowledging that at the beginning of any relationship, before you get entangled, is one of the most important elements of keeping on track and not getting lost, and not getting too entangled or too overwhelmed by a relationship. That doesn't mean that you have to always be cerebral and never let go, because obviously a relationship, a big part of it is knowing when to let go. But letting go in the beginning, when you're still in a place where you're not really sure, or you yourself may be too vulnerable. How often is it that a person coming off of a bad relationship is very receptive to a new one because they're just so desperate to forget the old one? They'll do things that are mistakes. So knowing all of that tells you that early stages, it's better to be, I wouldn't call it cerebral, but better to be calculated, or better to think about it. And that's what this verse is saying. So Jacob didn't back off and say, I'm not going to kiss Esau because maybe Esau has bad intentions. Jacob was not stupid. He knew that Esau is not suddenly becoming his best friend. But he allowed, they both embraced, but they also wept. I don't know what Esau was thinking. Maybe he was thinking the same thing. But Jacob was probably thinking, it wasn't just they wept over the years they lost, over the wars that two brothers had. Because he wept because he knew it wasn't complete yet. He knew there was real love here. Because the essence, as I said, they were brothers. And they were true brothers with same parents, Rebecca and Isaac, two tzaddikim. And one day Jacob and Esau would become one and united. But he wept, Jacob, and maybe Esau too, because they knew that it's not going to last. It's something to cry about when you have a moment of truth and you know it's not going to last. It's one of the saddest things, actually. It was tears, and that's why the Torah tells us about it. It's tears of acknowledgement, of recognition, that just as we recognize that we love each other, we also recognize we may not be ready yet for each other, which was the case. So you see, this verse is filled with so many paradoxes, which reflect really the paradoxes of all forms of attraction and everything, and all the mistakes we make and all the right moves we make, especially early on. So Jacob was not deluded. He understood very well that this is we'll call it a qualifiable kiss, if you can call it that. He knew that it was a dotted kiss, meaning that it may not be complete, but still there was a certain element of beauty to it. At the same time, he was sober and understood that it may not be at the time or the place. So in our own relationships, the same is true. That type of attitude, first of all, number one, to know that you are subjective. You're the most blind person when it comes to your own relationships. And that attraction, or any type of temptation or seduction, or anything that really connects you to another person, in the early stages, it's always best to keep it, not to stop it, but to keep it under control, because you don't want to jump into something so quickly, because then you'll be invested in it, and it's much harder to get yourself out, because then you start justifying things that shouldn't be justified. At the same time, when you're beginning to meet someone, just because certain things are not clicking, you don't feel immediate, people call magnetism, or electricity, or clickability, all the different words. I picked up all these words doing a lot of these words, the clickability factor, as some call it. They say everything works, but the clickability factor is low, whatever that means. Okay. I remember that actually I was once doing a seminar. It was a singles discussion about relationships, and there was a question and answer period. So someone got up and said, "I'm dating this guy. He's like 25 years older than I am, and everything seems to work perfectly, but the clickability factor isn't there. Anyway, there was, for some reason, I don't know, there was an older woman in the crowd, so she gets up. He's probably having an affair with someone else, that's why. You know, it wasn't so clickability, it wasn't clicking because they was doing something. I don't know if she was right or wrong, but I remember it was very interesting. She had I asked her if she knows that from experience, you know, but I don't even know what she was doing there. She was like the oldest single I ever met. I'm talking about in their 70s. So, but she was going to singles events. I guess she was a young spirit. Okay? She was. Well, I knew a guy who used to come to this class, and he was dating a woman for years. I said, what? The time has come. Why don't you come on? How many years? When he hit 65, I said to him, maybe this is the time. He says, so he smiled and said, I'm holding my options up. Even he knew that it was unhealthy procrastination, whatever. So there's an expression that I use in the book Toward a Meaningful Life that actually was said by the Rebbe to a couple who was having problems, difficulties between them. So he said an expression which I think is extremely powerful and a big lesson in life. He said to them, when you are close when you should be distant, you will end up being distant when you should be close. Which of course has many meanings to it. See, when two human beings, even if we are soulmates and even if we're totally connected, the fact is we are two distinct individuals, born to different families, different personalities. The beauty of a relationship is not that two people become a clone of each other, is that it's like they do with the circles, like two people like that, two circles. But then they come to a point that they join, like that, like a chain. So the unity is complete, but the circles are still also complete. But they learn through humility, through bittul, through a sense of modesty in presence of a third partner, a higher presence, while we have a chuppah, a canopy. They learn that it's not just about me and me, there's a third factor, and that's why there can be synergy between two people. And it's not considered like one has to be annihilated for the other one to exist. Or either one. That they both can be complete, and actually their individuality is enhanced by the relationship, not compromised. Now it sounds like a contradiction. How could that be? How could someone who's married be more individualistic than someone who's single? Every New Yorker single asks that question. They say, I understand there are virtues of marriage, but you have to give up something. First thing you have to do is give up your individuality, because individuality is defined by most of us as doing whatever you like. You don't have to answer to someone. As soon as you're with someone else, you have to answer. Where are you going? Are we going together? The whole thing. You have to share resources. One person squeezes the toothpaste from the middle of the tube, the other one from the bottom. These are serious problems. Of course, the Jewish solution is buy 2 tubes of toothpaste. But that's already getting into the budgetary issues and stuff like that. You know what that means? We'll forever have to have 2 tubes of toothpaste. And of course, there's always that little sense when you're a little upset at your partner, so you end up squeezing their toothpaste tube, and that can create new reasons to go to therapy. Anyway, I've seen a lot, as you can tell. Toothpaste tubes happen to be a big issue. I don't know if today, but in the 90s it was a thing. That's a joke. So the point I'm making here is that when you define individuality as such, that you can do it. But what happens if you define individuality as discovering who you really are, the real you? That's what I would call individuality. Individuality doesn't just mean that you can run around, you don't have to answer to anyone. Who says that's individuality? That's just being, who says that's even freedom? When you know that somebody cares, and somebody, when you come late or your plane landed late, they care that whether you're all right, is that a compromise of your individuality? Now, of course, it depends on a healthy relationship, it won't be. Unfortunately, some relationships, it is that way because one person is a control freak or someone is imposing or demands, etc. But then that's not because relationships have downsides, because people go into relationships with the unhealthy element. They'll bring their they're as they say, junk in, junk out. So going back to this, this discussion is that we all have our distinct individuality, and that's why there are times even the closest people need to be in their space. And when you should be distant, when you're close, when you should be distant, you'll end up being distant when you should be close. When two people need their own space for whatever reason, time to think, and not even because of a conflict or anything like that. A healthy relationship, partners will respect each other for that, and understand that person needs their little cave now, or whatever it is that they need to go. And it's not like, why don't you let me in, or force yourself in. That's a sign of insecurity. It's not a sign of love necessarily. It's a sign that you're afraid of not being part of another person's life. If a person really loves you, that doesn't mean that each person will always understand the other. You find the best relationships on earth. Ask them, do you understand each other? They'll be the first to say, no, I have no clue. Because it's not a contradiction. They're secure enough to be able to have a relationship with someone and actually celebrate the fact that the person has a mystery to them. Now, I'm not talking about a mystery that is sinister or negative. A mystery, the fact is that each of us have dimensions that are sometimes so profound that another person can't perfectly get. Real relationships, you'll see, that's not like one person. They don't always understand each other, but they respect and they're fine. Not only fine, they maybe even, as I said, celebrate the mystique of the other. And that's when relationships thrive. So going back to our idea here, that in any relationship, especially when a courtship is at the early stages, it's a dance. It's a true dance. And a dance requires moments of distance and moments of closeness. When I say distance, I just want to qualify. I don't mean distance as in the context, distance as in cold and apart. I mean distance as in space. Like a real dance. There's in and out. Or like when you find any good music, there's tension and resolution. There are times where two notes get very close. There are times that they pull apart. And any dance you'll have the healthy back and forth, where there are times of true oneness, and there are times where there's true individuality. And this too is very much part of this idea of having the discretion when you enter a relationship to know when to kiss and when not to kiss, so to speak. That you always understand that there's a balance necessary, and that you should not just build them purely on your own instincts. Now, of course, there comes a point when two people know each other and have gone through the preliminary stages and you've developed trust. Then, of course, the other extreme is also to stay distant or to stay apart when you should be getting closer is equally problematic. So, but because it's such a back and forth thing, it can get very confusing and especially when we are emotionally involved. I always point out when you look at a good cardiogram of what a heart is supposed to look like, you look at it, if it looks like this, it's not a good sign, right? Straight line. Straight line is good in mathematics. It's the shortest point between the shortest path between one point and the next. But in a heartbeat, that's not exactly healthy. That's called death if the line is like that. Now, you want to have is a perfect cycle, a perfect what is it called? Ellipses. Yeah, perfect. If it's too high and then there's too low, it's also not balanced. And if you think about it, it's like a wave. It looks like a wave, like literally like an ocean wave. If you're familiar a little with physics, there's the discussion whether light is particles or waves. But the difference between a particle and a wave is fundamental difference. It's the difference between what life really is like and what life is not like. Particles are defined points. It's like grains of sand would be particles. A wave is a flow. And it's a flow that's constantly ebb and flow. It's always going up and down. Many of us try to force a life into being like particle driven when it really should be wave like. What is particle? Particles seem to give you a sense of control. It's like taking you have 100 objects and figuring out how to put them in different places. But life is not a composite of a bunch of details. Life is a wave that flows, just like moods flow. And it's about learning how to navigate these waves. That's the secret to life. But so often people, what they do is they try to force it into like the shelves. You want to file your life. You want to control it. It doesn't work that way. Those that know, the best swimmers, you look at good swimmers, they know when to swim and when not to swim. When a storm strikes and the waves get heavy, and the waves get strong, they stop swimming because you can't fight the tide, and they just allow themselves to float. They may even go backwards. They may even go back because you cannot fight. You have to go with the flow. And then when the water's calm, that's when they thrust forward and they make their move. And the same thing is in life. And love is always compared to waves, like water. Real love is a wave experience, not a particle one. You know, I think in the summer I did a class on, is love a verb or a noun? And one of the points I discussed there was that the feminine version of love, or for a woman, love is a noun. It's a state of being, and for men, it's an act. It's an action. And the truth is, the woman got it right, as usually when it comes to things like that. If all the men knew that, we'd be in a better world. I say this as a man, so I have credibility here. So because you see, for example, a fish in water is not like a fish experiencing water. It's a natural state. It's natural state. Love is a state of being, even when you're asleep. People you love even when you're asleep. It's not only when you see them or when you're acting in a way that's loving. It's like the difference between a good person and a person who does good things. A person who does good things is while they're doing something good, they're doing a good thing. A good person is good all the time, even when it's inconvenient for them. And the same thing is with love. So to really fully understand this flow, this ebb and flow, and this wave element of it, it's this verse where it says that the dotted kiss, the dots over Vayishakeu, when Esav kissed Jacob, really teaches us this understanding, this discretion. That there are times you may kiss someone that's not for you, and there are times that you're not kissing someone that is for you. And it's about timing and understanding that we are able to make such choices in a healthy way if, as I said, we get ourselves out of the way and don't let your subjectivity be the final arbiter when it comes to these matters. Which means it may require getting advice, or just means require having some reflection, not allowing your emotions just to get complete hold over you or control over you. And when you are close, when you're distant, when you should be close, then you'll end up being close when you should be distant. When you withhold a kiss, when you should be withholding it, then when you kiss, you really kiss the right way. That's the rule of all integration. It's the balance. It's the balance in relationships. This is critical. But the truth is, it's really a formula for success in every given area. As a writer, I can tell you, it doesn't always flow. You write, sometimes you write, it goes very easily, sometimes it doesn't. And you try to force yourself and you don't know what you can do. So when you're not that experienced, you try to break down the walls. The real way to do it is you just have to let go. The greatest things that come to people are when they let go. Still driven for your goal, but not driven on your terms. That's the difference. Because when you're driven toward a goal, sometimes it works by swimming toward it, and sometimes it works by you have to let go and you'll be carried, and then at some point when you have to make a move, as I mentioned with the swimmer, you make the move. So in a way, this ambiguity, I wouldn't call it ambiguity, but this two-way street about the kiss in this week's chapter is really the story of life. It's dance, the flow of discretion, of knowing when not. And ultimately, as I said earlier, it's the total confidence. Confidence that the same confidence we have in the goodness of ourselves and of others is the same confidence in the possibility of love. I find that very many people today, even though they may not call giving up completely, but in some ways have given up on reaching their complete dreams and fulfilling realizing their full aspirations. And the reason is because after a while you get hurt and disappointed. And you just say, you know what, if I get 50% of what I want, I'll be happy. And then it goes down 40%. And then it comes to a point where some people say, if at least I don't get hurt, I'll be happy. And the expectations lower like that. You go to a newborn child, early young child, and everything is possible. The sky's the limit, beyond the sky, because the child explores all the possibilities. Newborn children look around, look how they look at the world. It's envious. They look at the world as this amazing place. They have no clue. But they do have a clue because they see the truth. They see it without the layers that have jaded us. So they see the way it is. But then what happens is we lose that. We slowly age. And the worst part of aging is not the wrinkles and not the loss of hair, the thinning of hair or white. It's loss of that exuberance, that sense of enchantment. That's what we can cry about. And the tragedy is that you didn't have to lose it. Because even if you're not naive, it doesn't mean you have to lose the sense of enchantment. I've seen the greatest people that I've met in my life, the few. They had that ability. They saw the difficulties of life, and they were not naive at all. But they never lost the sparkle, and they never lost the dreams. Now that's not easy, because someone living in denial, never saw pain, or makes believe they never saw it. That's one thing. But someone that really saw darkness and still can maintain a type of childlike enthusiasm and free abandon, that's a person who's a true soulful person. They didn't let their body and the material world, the Esav of their lives, destroy the soul's passion. Now that's not easy, but that requires real soul. You have to really be connected to the soul, because there's no other way that you can maintain it. As I said, when we're younger, we all have that type of passion. That comes with the turf. But to maintain it, once you've seen things that are pain, once you've seen pain and loss and how people can hurt each other, and see best friends kill each other and stuff like that, and it's hard to hold on to. But that's really that's really the real story, that love is absolutely always possible. There's nothing that can block it except your own perceptions and your own sense of limitations. And that soul is always intact. I don't know if there's a more powerful message that Judaism and the Torah offer us, that no matter who you are, no matter what you've gone through, you're not damaged goods. You may have experienced damage. We say about the Jews have suffered, but they didn't become sufferers. Even though I know some of our mothers and others seem to be that way. But in truth there are people who've seen damage, but they've not become damaged by it. They've seen horrible things. You talk to Holocaust survivors. So there's a lot of pain there, a lot of pain that's not spoken about. But look, some of the Holocaust survivors, unbelievable, sensitive souls. But they saw the worst. They saw the worst that a human can dehumanize others, and they should be absolutely bitter and angry and complete no hope in mankind, the human race. And yet you see many who rebuilt lives, and they'll show you a photo album of their grandchildren, and they'll say, "This is my vengeance." That's unbelievable. Not to blow up the German cafes, and not to go back and blow up which all nations always did. The first thing they did when they came to power, after a nation humiliated or raped and destroyed them, they went back for vengeance. And man says, "This is my vengeance. My vengeance is my grandchildren. My vengeance are the legacy and the bad that the Jews said. We saw evil like no one had seen, and yet we became better people in the process." That is a person who seen Esav, seen the devil, and yet does not lose their sight of being an angel. That's not easy to hold on to, but that's a person that really has embraced the soul, because essentially they're saying is, there's no evil and no darkness in the world that's more powerful than my goodness and my soul and what I believe in. Who's going to win? And when you give in and allow yourself to succumb to the demoralization or the lowering of expectations or whatever it is that happens to us through life's difficulties, basically you're saying the other side won. The darkness of life has won over you, even if it diminished just a bit your hopes. So the idea that we believe in each other, and we believe that every person can find the right love in their lives, find the right person to kiss forever, and is an absolute fundamental essential principle in Jewish thought. It goes hand in hand with the belief that every soul is always intact, no matter what happens. We say in the morning, the shamash and the satabi tahirihi. The soul that you've given me is pure. No person on earth is immune, or no person on earth is absolved of saying that statement, no matter what happened to them. That means there's a part of you that never is impacted and never is contaminated or tainted by any toxins. That's what it means. That doesn't mean that the arteries and the channels and the outer layers will not remain intact. It could very well be that they've been hurt. But there's hope, because the pilot flame never burns out. And this is true individually for our souls, and it's true for finding our soulmate. So when you're armed with such confidence, then you go in it with a different attitude, and with that attitude, and with discretion, as I said, not just jumping at everything you see, and not just thinking that everything you're attracted to is yours, or everything that you're not attracted to is not yours. Then those two elements of knowing the absolute confidence and having discretion allows you to be able to make a choice when to kiss and when not to kiss. To be able to recognize when it's an Esav, when it's not an Esav, is it complete, is it not complete. So there is a model and there is a technique, and hopefully I shared some thoughts that can help get the ball rolling. And all we learned it all from one dotted kiss in this week's chapter, Vayishakehu. And of all people, Jacob and Esav teach us this lesson. So when you think about it, it's actually something documented. This happened over 3,600 years ago. A kiss, 3,600 years ago. How many kisses are talked about for so long? And it still remains a driving force that in a way haunts history and also inspires it. When you go on the more mystical level, something I didn't discuss tonight, but I discussed in previous years, especially after September 11th, 2001, that this whole Jacob-Esav battle is also on a cosmic level and a national level, is really the battle between the West and the East, is the battle between the Western Roman Christian world and the Jewish world, and battles that have been fought over the centuries. So the kiss of this ambiguous or half-hearted or complete-hearted kiss between Jacob and Esav has implications in that as well. But that's for another time. We don't have to go into that right now. We talked more on the personal level. So, my blessing to all of you is that you should find that soulmate. Well, first find the soul within you that you can kiss. Meaning learn how to kiss yourself. Love yourself, that is. And it's hard to kiss yourself. You can kiss your fingers, I guess, but to kiss your soul, to embrace yourself in a full way, and be blessed to find quickly your soulmate, so you can ultimately create that union in this dark world and bring some love into this world. That's a blessing to all of you here. And I want to say that we dedicate this class, I say with pain in my heart, but also with this a smile, to our good friend Mark Fisher, who passed away this week at a young age, early 51 was he? 52? And he goes back from the early class from back in 1997. I think I met him 96. Same time I met you? Even before? Oh, yeah. Your sister I met earlier, I think, right? Right. Sure. But anyway, Mark Fisher passed away. I just went yesterday for a shiva call to his dear wife, Toby. They actually met at an event that I spoke at, a singles event in the 5 towns. She was telling me about it. And so I'm sure his soul is here with us. He was a beautiful man. And when I met him, he first came to this class. It wasn't this place, it was Upper West Side. He was, I remember his hunger and thirst. It was so powerful that he just... his ability to absorb and listen was pretty amazing. A brilliant guy, and very unassuming. He was a person who never let on, or he could, even though he was quite smart. People would share with him things. He was just that type of beautiful guy. And then he met this beautiful wife, Toby, and he moved to Flatbush. I never thought he would go to that extreme, but he went all the way. And so we dedicate this class to his elevating soul and neshama. He was a big part of this class in the early years. When we built the Meaningful Life Center, it was actually in his office. I don't know if you remember, in the law firm that he was using. In his boardroom, we had the first Meaningful Life Center meeting. As well. So I have to acknowledge that. And he has a 5-year-old son, 3-year-old daughter. So I guess they'll carry on his legacy. And I just wanted to dedicate the class to him from my heart. to someone that was a part of this group. Whether you know it or not, this class has been going on almost for 30 years now. And in an unbroken chain, all word of mouth. So everybody here is linked to people before us, which is, has a good feeling to it. I just recently remembered that I have old videotapes, VCR, what do they call? I don't even know what they're called, from classes in the 90s. I think we're going to convert them and put them up on YouTube as relics when we all wore the clothes of younger men and women. So, anyway, so Mark, wherever you are, I'm sure he's here with us in this class. May this class be a tribute to his, as I said, traveling soul. And may we all only celebrate joyous occasions, souls inside of bodies. As I said, the challenge is to transform this material world into a spiritual place. And with that, I want to also announce that tomorrow night, Philip will be giving his class 7 p.m. So anyone interested, Philip Namaworth is a colleague, student of mine, also back from the years of the mid-90s, back from actually mid-90s, mid-80s. Wow. Yeah, Philip I know back from 1985. And he'll be giving his class, and we continue to do this every Wednesday night, both in cyberspace. I appreciate those that come here because I know this can be watched in the comfort of your own, as I like to put it, bubble bath. I'll be here next Wednesday night, and if you haven't left us your contact information, like an email address, please do so we can stay in touch. And please see me, Belleville here, and the Meaningful Life Center as a resource, as an ally to each of you. And it's an honor to be traveling together through the Esavs and Jacobs of our lives, and may it be a very peaceful and illuminating week. And next week we resume and continue. If you want to know, by the way, the topics of all classes are all posted a few months ahead on our website. There's a calendar, so in case you want to check out the topics and themes, some people ask me, that's a place to look it up. And with that said, may everyone have a wonderful week, a week of joy and peace, inner peace and outer peace, and I look forward to see you again next week. Thank you.